Controlling the mute and mute. They're controlling the mute and mute. Good evening, Partha. Hello, Partha. Good evening. Good evening, Professor.
Sir, how are you, sir?
How are you?
All good, sir.
Very good. Very good.
Good to see you after a long time.
General,
Partha,
thank you for joining.
Partha, I'm seeing you after a very long time because somehow
Partha, good evening. Good
I
evening.
can hear you, Partha. I can hear you. Hi,
Sir,
Pranav.
how are you, sir?
How are you?
All
Very
good, sir.
well.
Very good. Very good.
Good to see you after a long time.
Thank you for joining.
I'm seeing you after a very long time because somehow
Good evening. Good
I
evening.
can hear you, Partha. I can hear you.
How are you, sir?
How are you?
All good,
I
sir.
was telling now that I taken off the list, but I put me back on the mail. Otherwise, month of March was missed out for me completely. I didn't get any communication. But now I'm very much on. Thanks, Pranav.
So I think let's start, sir. Probably is the time now to start.
Yeah, let's start.
Yes. Good evening and good morning to all who have joined today's very important leadership discussions. On behalf of the Partha S Ghosh Academy Leadership and on my personal behalf, it's my great pleasure to welcome you all and today's distinguished panelists, Mr. Peter Willits, Mr. Ravikant, Commander Jetli, and Dr. Paul Grumble, and today's lead speaker, Dr. Partha S Ghosh, who is going to speak on very relevant topic in present times, which is challenges of leadership development in various cultures around the world. To give you a very brief about the Academy, it has conducted 25 international leadership talks so far and successfully organized leadership training programs for senior officers of NIC Government of India. So with these remarks and welcome, I request Mr. Pranav Patel to give the introduction to introduce the speakers.
Thank you very much, sir. And it's an honor to introduce all the distinguished speakers for the day. And it's an amazing panel to look at for the subject matter that we are looking at. To start off with, first of all, we have our own Dr. Partha S Ghosh, who is the lead speaker for today. He's the founder of the Partha S Ghosh Academy of Leadership here at IIT Kharagpur. A global figure recognized for his innovative contributions, redefining business and economic models across industry worldwide. From shaping future leaders at the Academy in IIT Kharagpur to strategic advisory role with corporate titans like McKinsey, Dr. Ghosh's influence spanned boardrooms and classrooms alike. So pleasure to have you with us, sir. Next, we have corporate royalty with Mr. Ravikant, sir, here. He's a veteran with an illustrious 50 years career. As a former CEO and Vice President of Tata Motors, he spearheads transformational acquisitions of iconic brands like Jaguar, Land Rover, Tata Daewoo, and many more. His board membership spans renowned firms like Kone India, Vedanta, and Voltas, showcasing his wide range impact. He's a passionate advocate of education and healthcare initiatives himself. Then we have someone joining in from UK, Mr. Peter Willits, a visiting professor at the University of Buckingham, whose expertise in operational efficiency is sought across globally. Peter, sir, has been at the forefront of large-scale business transformations, partnering with Fortune 500 giants like Siemens, Continental, and even at UK's prestigious National Health Service itself. Then we have someone joining in from Germany. We have Dr. Paul Grumble, the CEO of TMC Munich, whose 30 plus years of strategic consultancy experience has transformed numerous global enterprises, from pharmaceutical titans to automobile giants and logistic powerhouse. Dr. Grumble's initiatives, approaches to driven performance through mergers, reorganization, and process optimizations are truly game-changing. And to round up the panel and to also be the anchor for today's panel discussion, we have our own Commander V.K. Jetli, a distinguished alumni of IIT Kharagpur, dons multiple hats as a founder and board member of Partha S Ghosh Academy of Leadership, and author of motivational leadership books, and also the book on 100 great IITians. The book is out. We really love the book, sir. So thank you very much for that. And he's also the driving force behind a lot of initiatives here, especially the Alumni Foundation. He's the founder of Pan IIT and the first president as well. So it's an honor. We're really glad to have all of you here today. Thank you very much, sir, for spending time and coming on for this focused panel discussion that we have. Thank you very much. Over to you, Commander.
Thank you, Pranav, for excellent introduction for such a qualified, highly qualified, in fact, the panel with Paul Grommel from Germany, Peter from UK, and Partho himself from USA, and our own Ravi Kanji from Mumbai. I tell you, it's really great that they will be firing questions today to Partha Ghosh. So as a panel, before I start with the question and to Partho, let me introduce to you, today is our 25th International Monthly Lecture Series. 25th. So that means just a bit more than 2 years back, we started this journey. And let me tell you, people have been liking it. Excellent feedback we have been getting. Now, all those lectures, they are on our website also. You can see them. We had greats like our one of the ministers, Suresh Prabhuji, we started with that. Then R. Gopala Krishnans of Tata Sons, then Partha Ghosh himself, Dr. Naresh Trehan, who is a renowned cardiologist, Mr. Narayan Murthy of Infosys, Dr. Amarpreet Sani from USA, our Air Chief Marshal, Arup Raha, then Mr. Zaimiko Higashi from Japan, not from Japan, sorry, from USA only. Then Professor Anil Shastrabudhe, ex-AICT chairman, Professor George Rackett, Paul Grommel himself, Anand Deshpande, Professor Ram Gopal, and the list is endless, including our Ravi Kanji. So it has been an excellent journey. You are most welcome to suggest some more great speakers who can speak on some topic which have some relationship with the leadership qualities and all that. So today, without wasting any more time, I straight away go to what I'm supposed to be doing it. So may I request the panelists, but before I give the floor to the panelists, I will just make a few, you may call it guidelines. Please ask your question within around 30 seconds. Don't take more than a minute maximum. So that you are to the point. When you ask a question to Partho, try to do it within a minute. That should be good enough. Of course, before you ask question, in the first round, kindly do take 2 to 3 minutes to give your thoughts about the leadership and about the topic today, what you are going to talk about. For the first round, for the second round, etc., when you ask a question, just do it within 30 seconds to 1 minute. So may I start with, among the three of you, with Peter from UK. So Peter, please go ahead. Please tell us about your thoughts about the leadership, and then fire the question of the first round to Partha Ghosh.
Fine, thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. So my thoughts on the topic we're looking at is essentially how we go from the 20th century to the 21st century. We're already through the first quarter of the 21st century, but there's always a risk that we end up, if not fighting the battles of the last war, at least thinking about leadership in terms of our own formative experiences in the 20th century. So my focus today is on how we take what we think are the foundations from the 20th century and actually challenge those in the context of the 21st. And I'm going to look through three themes. There are many themes that we could take, but I'm going to take three themes today. One is the role of externalities. The second one is the role of intrinsics, of people intrinsics. And the third one is the function of agency, or the challenge of agency in a in a complex world. And the very brief introduction of how I think about these things. I started life as a philosopher. I was born as a philosopher. Some people would say I was born as a philosopher prince. And then I went through a 35-year diversion through the world of economics, and having emerged from that independently, shall we say, I've now chosen to go back to my world of origin of philosophy. So you'll see that many of the questions that I'm asking have a philosophical bent to them. So without going further into that, I'm going to ask my first question to Partha. And the clock is now running on the 30 or 45 or 60 seconds. So the first one is around externalities. In the 20th century, life was easy for a leader. And especially in business, you have one aim, one goal, maximization of shareholder value. As we got to the end of the 20th century, this was challenged by the notion of stakeholder value. And I resisted that. I thought we enter a realm of what the Greeks called polytele, multiple objectives, and we don't need to look further than Laplace to know that once you have 3 objects, game is over, right? You can go no further. So as soon as you introduce more than one objective for a leader, you've now rendered the trade-offs immensely complex. However, in the world today, the externalities are becoming increasingly evident. I talk about climate change in particular, that we can't ignore. So I don't think we can no longer just look at the simple version in the business world of shareholder value. So far, the proper modern theory was we delegate the management of externalities, of dysfunctions of the market, to government and to regulation. But now that externalities become a common cause with climate change, the question to Partha is, can we continue to delegate to government the management of externalities?
Thank you, Peter. I don't expect anything less from a philosopher like you. It's a brilliant question. So let me build on it. Clearly, if you look at the world within the last 25 years, the complexities of managing the planet, the governance of the planet, whether you look from geopolitical angle, climate, wealth gap, even the pandemic that we dealt with, are global in nature. So even it has gone beyond governments, and the complexities of relationships between governments in the process have become significantly complex than perhaps it was 100 years ago, even before the Second World War. So one deep meaning in your question is the governance of the planet has become significantly more complex, significantly more uncertain, and we have to think of how do we manage that process. And it is an irreversible process, so I think we have to think about the future and see what are the different kinds of mechanisms one needs to think about. On the corporate side, when you look at a company like Intel, when you look at a company like Boeing, we have seen these were giants once upon a time. They had one objective, that is to make money. But unfortunately, these companies have faltered. We have seen what has happened with Boeing. Of course, is working very hard to come back. Intel, which was darling of Wall Street once upon a time, Intel Inside meant something. Today, Intel has been marginalized. So as you could see, both at the corporate level, even with one objective, the leadership qualities that we need have been significantly not met. At the government side, we also see the challenges of dealing with complexity. So that's one of the reasons, by the way, we have begun this academy, to think of how could we lead the leadership at a higher level of, if you will, mission, or what is this civilization all about. And that's where I think some of the thoughts of the Vedic philosophy comes into play, where we talk about one humanity. The concept of that we are in this planet to create enlightenment within individuals. Making money, capitalism or socialism are at lower levels of abstraction. So somehow I feel over the last, I would say almost 200 years since the Industrial Revolution, we lost sight of the higher level purpose of we being in the planet, And I think it is important that we find a way to raise our sights to that higher level purpose, to understand what is the meaning of we being in the planet and the role that we could play to make the planet a beautiful place. Recently I was in Japan, and one thing I was very struck that in every dimension of Japanese life, I could see beauty, gracefulness, humility, cleanliness, honesty, efficiency, timeliness. So a country has achieved that. Now, the point is how to spread such a model where the government and the corporates and the individuals, they all harmonize with each other to create, if you will, a music or symphony, or if you call it fabric, which looks beautiful. And I think every society could achieve that. If Japan, after the war, it was only about, 75, 80 years ago, when Japan was ruined, to come out and create such a beautiful socioeconomic dynamic could be created. So the point is, I feel optimistic. If we look at other countries with positive mentality, what we could learn from Japan, even what could we learn from the US? US, of course, in a kind of a state of decadence, I might say, given what's going on in the political front. Also, if you look at the violence in the country, the gun violence, the mass shooting, but the innovative spirit of the United States with the Japanese way of managing socioeconomic dynamic, if that could be merged. So this merging of thoughts with one humanity concept of philosophy, which Vedic philosophy talks about, if we can bring that all together, I think we could create the world that Peter, that you perhaps is looking for. And your question obviously has a built-in answer that we would need a fundamental change. It cannot be more and better of the same of the past. It has to be a new S-curve, a fundamentally different S-curve. And that's why, by the way, this leadership movement that the academy has started at IIT Kharagpur is extremely important. It is not a national movement, it's a global movement. And I think we have to honor this movement with that kind of commitment. Then I think we would be able to get out of the crisis that modern civilization is living through.
Peter, you could go with your follow-up question, please. One more follow-up question in the first round itself. Unmute yourself. Unmute, please. Peter, unmute.
Was that a follow-up question on the same theme, or was it my second question to the second theme?
Okay, you don't want to ask now?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to ask.
Yeah,
I
please
have a second question on a separate theme, or was that a follow-up question to the first question?
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll ask my second question then in that case. My second theme is one of intrinsics. And if we think back to the 21st century, one characterization of our organizations were ones of hierarchy, ones of order, ones of obedience. That's what we were, the models that we were working with. And, thank goodness, times have changed, and the mass of people in our organizations now have much higher levels of education, much higher levels of information, and they're much more used to using their own judgment in many, many circumstances. All right. So the nature of people's consciousness has evolved. So then the question, one more thing. Part of what a leader has to do, of course, is to give a common purpose to the entity that they're leading. So whether that is a commercial organization or a, dare I say, a military organization that I'm not familiar with, or a university, or even a country, you have to give some sort of common purpose to that. So the question to Partha is, how does a leader give a common purpose to the organization while benefiting from and respecting the autonomy, the intrinsics and the autonomy, and the diversity of the people who that leader is leaving? So how to assure commonality when you genuinely accept diversity and you genuinely accept autonomy of the people.
Yes, absolutely. Peter, when I look at the different leadership models, even the ones people are teaching at Harvard Business School and Sloan schools of the world, they're basically extension of the industrial model. Where I think your question, where it's what you have embedded in your question, that it used to be top down, the boss or the leader knew the answers, and the rest of the organization has to follow. But in the knowledge economy, I would suspect that what you're driving us towards, that the knowledge is at the edges. Edges meaning people who are literally interfacing with the customer, with the problem they're solving, with the research and development departments. And indeed, in the knowledge economy, the knowledge is power. And the people who are literally dealing with the knowledge, their instincts, their thought processes, their ideas need to be continuously respected, heard, and in the process synergized. So obviously, the nature of leadership that we need in this new world, the importance of, if I may use the word, micro instincts or intrinsics, as you call it, versus a macro holistic view, both have to be integrated, and that's not easy. So the leader has to have a view of the world, view of the humanity, as we talked earlier, the climate change, the wealth gap, the geopolitical disorder that we are living through on one side, on the other side, being able to appreciate the micro intrinsics, the knowledge, the instincts within the organization. And that ability to synergize as opposed to the command and control structure of the past is very different. And I think that's again why we need leadership model, which is where humility plays a more important role than commanding, where ability to learn and adapt and synergize plays a more important role than controlling. Similarly, to inspire the people at the edges, the micro intrinsics or micro instincts that have to be nurtured in a way that we could synergize. Now, you have touched on the answer. To synergize, you have to have a profound purpose, a profound vision. Everyone in the organization could connect with. That's where, again, I think many organizations are falling short. And that's, again, why we need to literally begin this leadership movement that we're talking about, so that we could bring the micro and the macro together, synergize them, and in the process help our people in an organization to serve a profound purpose.
Okay, thank you, Partha. May I now request Mr. Ravi Kanji to kindly give your concepts about the topic of the day for around 2 minutes, and then after that, please go ahead with your questions.
Thank you. As Partha has suggested in his introduction, that leadership does depend upon culture and various other factors. So here I'm going to be talking about that leadership is contextual. And if the context changes, the style of leadership must change. And we have seen it change. For if the situation is stable, we have one kind of leadership. We have, if sudden downturn is there, we try to get another kind of leadership. But here what I'm talking about is somewhat which can be there for a century or more. The corporates, as we know today, are 200 years old, as has already been said, after the Industrial Revolution, when mass manufacturing and going to distances disconnected place of production from place of consumption. And therefore, large organizations were required. And therefore, a certain kind of leadership emerged, which we know is called leading from the front. And people have led from the front very successfully. Organizations have promoted that. Business schools have promoted that. It was good for a stable organization. But Industrial Revolution 3 and 4 has put this thing somewhat asunder. And what we are seeing is huge amount of unpredictability and uncertainty in the external environment, as Peter has also mentioned. We have we have tsunami of information. As a professor from MIT has said, Ray has said, that the rate of progress doubles every decade. It means a century of progress can be condensed in a month. Ray puts well. Century of progress can be condensed in a month at today's rate. Now, tomorrow it can be in a week, day after tomorrow it could be in a week. So there's huge amount of information which is coming. It is, and third is complexity. So many things happening at the same time. It is impossible for one person to be besieged of all these things, to know everything, and to be able to really take a sound judgment. And therefore, I believe that we should be looking for a new type of leadership, which I would like Partha to comment upon. But definitely leading from the front type of leadership is bursting at the seams and is getting nearly broken and is getting increasingly irrelevant for today's times. And therefore, what should be that new leadership for the next century or 21st century?
Thank you, Ravi. I just want to let you know, Ravi has written a new book, Leading from the Back. So he has got the answer to the question. But let me build on it. I think he has made some very fundamental points.
Can you come a little closer? We are not able to hear you.
Sorry. I didn't realize that. I'm extremely sorry. Yeah. So I just mentioned about the book that you have written, Ravi, Leading from the Back. So obviously you have an answer to the question. But let me build on it and bring some spice and color to a very deep question. Indeed, it's very true that if you look through the Industrial Revolution 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, essentially it is all about efficiency, discipline, scaling. Now, except 3.0, 4.0 was more about automation, but the basic spirit was discipline, efficiency, and obviously the military model, the command and control model worked, and we used to call it the pyramid structure of leadership. Now, if you invert the pyramid 90 degrees, the point moves towards the right, it looks like you're leading from the front because the pyramid on the right side, if you have inverted from 90 degrees. But the leading from the front concept essentially comes from the model of Alexander and many military models where brave heroes like Genghis Khan or Alexander, they come in the front and take the whole crew forward. But now we are living in a totally different world. And I'm a bit surprised that people still talk about leading at the front. And I'm so glad Ravi wrote the book, Leading from the Back. But my feeling is that in a world which is living through a knowledge revolution, there are many fronts. Every front is going back to Peter's point. Every front which is dealing with the problem is an important front. So the front, and a leader cannot be in multiple fronts. Everyone is in the front is a leader. So it's a concept of distributed leadership, point number one. And the person who is running that organization, let me call the CEO, if he wants to be a good leader, he has to be at a point where he has an excellent perspective of all the fronts. So it may be in the back, maybe in the middle, maybe, but it has to be a pivotal point, which is dynamic in nature. So he has excellent perspective of multiple fronts, and at the same time has the ability to integrate the instincts of each front towards a higher level purpose. So it connects with what Peter is also raised earlier, the intrinsic versus the holistic view. I think, so we do need a leadership model, which is not talking about front or back. I would say more talking about being in a pivotal point or being at the fulcrum, which gives you the maximum leverage to synergize multiple instincts, multiple point of views towards a higher level purpose. And that purpose also gets continuously defined because Ravi rightly said the world is changing so rapidly. What is to change in 30 years is changing in 3 months, maybe in the future, 3 weeks or 3 days. That ability to change, adapt, and revision the future would be extremely important, both based on the macro view as well as the view of the people at the edges, if I may use the word, using the network model, as opposed to people at the center.
Thank you.
Mr. Ravikant, you can go ahead with your second question, please.
Okay, leading from that, in our times, we somehow managed to live through this kind of organizations, rigid hierarchical organizations, or the leadership. Leading from the front type of leadership is also characterized by very bombastic, egoistic person, my way or highway type, wants to be there in the front cover of the magazines, on the TV channels, and all those kind of things. There are some very illustrious names of the past, the last 50 years or 40 years. And if you see that if those people were here today, they will be so out of date, so irrelevant today. And therefore, it is very difficult for people to tolerate this kind of thing. The millennials who have come now, if you ask them which kind of organization, which kind of leadership you want to work in, they are rejecting this kind of leadership. They are rejecting this kind of organization. They want to be given a space. They want to be given freedom. They want to be respected. They want to be acknowledged. And therefore, that kind of hidebound organization cannot do for them. And we'll find that if people persist, then there is bound to be a major rupture, because from the below, these millennials will come and they are going to demolish all this kind of thing. So it is for the organizations to really start adapting something different, which is more humane. Peter talked about, say, climate change and things like that. This millennial generation is more humane, more caring for more this thing. So organizations and the leadership must begin to respond to these kind of things. So I'm again coming back to the same thing. Leading from the front type of leadership is, I would say, passé, and we must look at something more humane, more caring, as you have said, distributed leadership model. Any comments?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I'll be very short, because in your question, the answer is embedded, as I always expect of Ravi. That's your leadership style. Through question, you offer the answer. But I absolutely agree with you. I see all the time, as you know, I'm also connected with universities, and I'm dealing with year after year different students. The students that I came across in 2005 at MIT versus the students that I see today at Tufts or Harvard are very different. So not only as millennials, I see there's a series of generations that a leader has to manage in an organization. So the one is the millennials expect something different. The values are different. Their preferences are different. Their purpose in life is different. And the millennials and the other Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, there's so many different generations that one has to deal with. So you're absolutely right. We need leaders who first know how to learn, as opposed to, as you rightly said, believing my way or the highway. That would be literally destructive. They will destroy this organization. Number two, humility. I know you can only learn if you are humble. Tremendous amount of empathy, inclusivity, commitment to social and environment responsibilities. Now we have to, Peter made a very important point, which kind of makes the question that you have raised, Ravi, difficult to answer, but I will try. He did make a point that when we have three objectives, it is very, very difficult to satisfy any one of them. And that we have seen. So the question I raise is that how could, when we have on one side the challenge of environment, other side the millennials expecting to work differently, whereas my people who are closer to me are working in my style. And third, I have to also satisfy the shareholders, that I have to generate high return on investment, return on equity, whichever metrics we feel comfortable with. So I feel we have to find a way not to think of these three differently, but create an integrated one purpose. And that's where I feel leaders in the 21st century has a challenge to define a measure which captures all the three or four objectives into one. And only then we would be able to serve that one purpose. And I don't know, the book called Three Ps, the planet, the profit, and people, tried that, but again, they broke it up into silos. So I think time has come for us to come up with one measure which really captures what you're talking about, and people could serve that with full commitment, full integrity, and honesty. So I think, again, that's why I think this Academy of Leadership that we have started is so important. Often people ask, what is leadership all about? It is how to be a good citizen, how to be a responsible citizen, and that's what we are trying to achieve.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ravi. Thanks, Partho. Though I am going to continue with these three panelists, but in between, I am just adding one question from Larry Kaufman. He wants to know, management of global problems require many countries to work together with common goals. Does a world leader need to wait for a global crisis to emerge? What first steps can one take to start the process to become a world leader?
Very good.
I've broken the sequence, by the way.
That's a very good question. I will short, Larry. Thank you for the question. Larry Kaufman, like Peter, is also, like all of you, are the great philosopher. You know, unfortunately, when the United Nations was created after the Second World War, earlier, as you know, the League of Nations was created after the First World War, did not work. The League of Nations, the United Nations is also not working. So I feel like we have seen in many situations that we need to form a small group, Larry, which you and I have discussed, who could really play the activist role to bring nations together. United Nations have failed because there are too many procedures. Goes back to what Ravi was talking about. They're still working with the old leadership model, hierarchical model. The Secretary General knows everything. He's always in the front. He gives his standard speech, but nothing happens. The wars continue, people die, crisis continues. So I think United Nations, we have to all agree, has failed miserably, though we are spending billions of dollars to run that organization. Now, to get out of that, Larry, what we need is, again, that's why the leadership movement, maybe I'm being too ambitious, that if few of us that assemble together take on this challenge, write articles, give speeches, activate people, hopefully we will be able to at least raise the conscience. Because a leader in Hungary versus a leader in Turkey versus a leader in China, they all have their own agenda. And they are obviously, as Ravi would agree, and Peter has also touched on it, they are suffering from a tremendous ego. Tremendous ego. They know it all. So obviously, working with them, it will not work because they have the answer and they have the agenda. So what we have to do is to create a movement which touch millions of people. Now, if Taylor Swift could touch so many people, if Michael Jackson could touch so many people, we have to find speakers who can also enter the hearts and minds of people, where we have to have a thought simplified, where people would try singing the songs that we want to celebrate all over the world. Now, I may sound very idealistic, but we have seen that in a person like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the eastern part of India. Once upon a time, he brought back a new sense towards Vedikism. So I think we need at times of crisis, before the crisis occur, that kind of selflessness in few individuals who could dive into the problem, and that's what is required. And hopefully this movement that we have started at IIT Kharagpur is next to Hijli Jail. People who do not know, hundreds of people lost their lives when they were fighting for the independence against the British. So I think to carry their spirit forward, it is our responsibility to address the challenge that, Larry, you have sounded. And, you know, many of us are from IIT Kharagpur. And also, I think India has a special responsibility. Not because I'm from India, but, you know, I had the privilege to study many philosophies before we started this leadership movement. The Vedic philosophy is so rich. It talks about one humanity. It talks about humility. It talks about honoring people with as their God, honoring nature. So if we can bring back those philosophy for the world without saying that this is my philosophy, then again people will run away. We have to be egoless and take the movement forward, Commander.
Thanks, Partho. Thanks, Larry. So I think probably we need champions in every world. Those who are champions and who have got leadership qualities and with the approach, thinking about the harmony and peace in the world, they should all come together, and then probably a movement can be built and probably things will happen, what Larry is trying to hint at. So now I go to Paul Grumble. Kindly give your ideas.
So thank you.
Your
Thank
thoughts
you.
about the leadership.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, for the ability to sharing the ideas from the German perspective. Maybe I have to paint a very dark picture about leadership. From a German perspective, the trust in Western leadership, in German leadership, in European leadership, is an all-time low. If you look even at the US, Biden is at the lowest rating since 70 years. The German chancellor is the lowest since World War II. The European Commission has the lowest rating ever, and also the French and Italian leadership is very low. And if you look at three areas of leadership, things become clearer. So if you look at the leadership of security, NATO has let down Germany quite a bit. Instead of preventing wars, they actually provoked wars in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and in Ukraine. And in all three cases, we are not winning, we are losing. We are not only losing the war, but we have created a lot of harm. 500,000 Ukrainian people are died because NATO has not get an agreement with Russia, which Russia has wanted. This becomes clearer and clearer. The second thing is the economic side. Also on the economic side, Germany is the last in the industry ranking because of bad leadership at corporation as well as on the government side, because we have the highest prices for energy because of the sanctions. Because if you actually have only a leadership capability, if you're against someone, you create sanction and you double down. Now, Russia has now 20,000 sanctions, but the harm is not done in Russia, it's done in Germany. So this is the worst leadership we ever had from a German perspective. And then we have the digital leadership. This is not governments, this actually are great corporations. And we see actually nothing in Europe, equals the leadership of companies in China and in the US. So I think from a European and German perspective, we need a complete new philosophy. And I think the first people are staying up and say we should leave the European Union and joining BRICS, because BRICS is actually, I think, the union of the future. And G7 and the European and the Western leadership is going down. And I think there will be no rescue. I think that people who have great inspirations will go after the people, who are for peace, they are for cooperation, and therefore well-being. And this is actually, the Germans see this more at the BRICS side than at the G7 and the other sides, where you have sanctions, you have wars, you have doubling down things. This is bad leadership from a German perspective. So I think the situation in Germany is quite there, and therefore part of the question is, what could be the new philosophy for Germany, which actually brings us out of this dark way where we have currently leadership, which let the population of Europe and Germany down like never over the last 70 years.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Paul. I fully empathize with the point that you have made. About I think it was almost 2 years ago in this same forum, I spoke about the Russia-Ukraine war, and the title of that talk was Leadership Deficit Exposed.
Mhm.
Basically, I talked about how the world, and particularly the United States, have mismanaged the relationships worldwide, and in the process, the mechanisms that they use, like you talked about sanctions, have continuously failed, but they keep still using the same tools, which have proven to be very blunt, if at all works. They're not sharp.
Never.
Now, why is I've gone to a step deeper because it's a very meaningful question. That why is this happening? In the US, we have the John F. Kennedy School of Government, we have the Woodrow Wilson School of Government, and the George Washington. There's so many different institutions which are studying the world, studying the politics, studying the global trends. And in spite of that, we seem to make very poor judgments. And I'm saying I'm including all of us, including the people in the White House, Congress, and the Capitol. And I personally feel that has happened because it goes back to the original question Peter and Ravi raised, that we are still working with leadership model of the past, which is egocentric, based on the past, without recognizing the world has changed. The world has changed dramatically in the last 50 years. And any leadership model which relies on the past as opposed to the future is bound to fail. So what you're looking at is a failure of the model, of the leadership model, which relied too much on the past equation. The past equation was NATO against communism, USSR, and China. USSR is no longer there. It collapsed. Russia was partly part of the G8. You talked about G7, part of G8. But unfortunately, we could not develop an integrated point of view on the G8 mission, the G8 vision. The Russia went out, the G7 still together, and you're right, most probably G7 would collapse. And obviously, I empathize where Germany is, Germany being one of the most powerful figures in the European Union, which is obviously feeling uncomfortable with what has happened in the last 4 or 5 years. So my recommendation for Germany is in a very interesting position, actually. Economically, it is powerful. It is right in the center of Europe. It could join the BRICS, but that would be a very interesting move, which I would not suggest. I would not suggest if I was in Germany, because within BRICS, we are talking about whom? Brazil, Russia, India, China.
Yeah.
And if we add the word S,
the great country of the future.
They are all each individually great country of the future. But together, does China and India see the world the same way? Most probably not. Russia and China is currently seeing the world the same way because they have a common enemy called United States. So I think we have to be a bit more strategic in defining the relationship of Germany. Germany could be a very interesting trump card for the world. And this is my recommendation for Germany. You can take it to the Chancellor. I know you are connected with those circles in Berlin, and from München, you can fly over and make the point. My point would be that Germany should have a very serious discussion with the US government that the way you have managed G7, the way you have managed NATO, that we have concerns and we are willing to live with certain group of people. And unless you fix how you want to provide leadership to the world. So Germany could play that role of bringing to attention that we are not comfortable with the kind of leadership that we are seeing coming from the United States. And that has to be loud and clear, but done in close quarters, not to be announced with the world. Point one. Point two, among the BRICS, the country which could, and again, I'm not trying to be biased, I hope, which has got that philosophical making, which people like Max Muller, people like Kant has appreciated, these are German philosophers, is the Vedic philosophy. So if the Vedic philosophy could be promoted, which is the concept of one humanity, where German-India alignment in association, not in against, because as soon as we have adversarial relationship with others, it becomes one against other. That doesn't work. It has to be a group which is promoting a concept for the whole world, for the benefit of the world. So we are not saying United States is wrong and Russia is right or China is semi-wrong. We are saying that, look, we have multiple thoughts. And what does Vedic philosophy say? It says that a great philosophy is one which can accommodate multiple thoughts, synergize, and make a better world. The US cannot say that is my style of government, my style of democracy, and every style of other governance is wrong. You know, the reason China is upset, China is sick and tired of US telling them how China should be managed. China has adopted a concept of state-owned capitalism. That's the concept of one system, which is different from United States. And Germany is closer to state-owned. It's not state-owned, but state-guided capitalism. Japan is very much state-guided capitalism. So every country has the right to develop their own system, right? So Vedic philosophy says, yes, you have the right to create your own system, but let this system work with each other in an integrated fashion to serve one humanity. So my recommendation to Germany would be to sit down with the Indian philosophers, I'm not saying politicians, philosophers, German philosophers, and develop an integrated point of view. And I would like to see the Academy of Leadership, Paul, with your guidance, could play that role. That would be my answer. It's a long answer. It's a difficult one, but I think one of the reasons we have Academy of Leadership, because we feel there's a leadership deficit, which you are concerned about, right? You said it's very dark. It is very dark.
Absolutely dark. It's really midnight.
It's midnight. But after midnight comes morning. So I remain optimistic if we look at the morning with a new purpose.
So can Paul be recommended for the post of Chancellor of Germany?
I think
not sure. But I have an additional question because because I think our neighbor Switzerland has a tremendous successful leadership model because they are the earnings per capita is 3 times of Germany. Even if there's a neighbor, and they have 2 different principles. The first thing is neutrality. I think Germans should become neutral and have good relation with Russia, China, India, as well as with the United States and England. The second is direct democracy. Since 500 years, a very successful model. People decide and lead the country, and not some leaders who are, leading in the wrong direction. So, in my opinion, this would be a good discussion we could do, Partha, in your Leadership Academy, whether you could think that the model of Switzerland could be at least a discussion point before Germany is joining the BRICS to go in this direction.
I agree with you. I think we should have, let me quickly comment on it. Very good point, because it's a very powerful point. Switzerland, Japan are 2 countries which provides us a great model. Economic success without playing unnecessary quote unquote groupism, if I use the word groupism. Yeah. Now, if you recall, I was quite concerned when the European Union was formed. That time I was a very active McKinsey partner. There was a big meeting we had in Munich. If you were there, I think, where the McKinsey partners got together. And we were kind of celebrating, European Union is being formed, is good for European companies. And I questioned, I said, look, Switzerland, which has got maximum number of global companies, Nestle, Omega, Asia, they have more global companies. They were not concerned that they have a strategic disadvantage because the market in Europe is small. The argument for companies like Siemens, Mercedes, BMW, and some of the British companies was the Europeans are losing out because the American market is too big, our markets are too small, so we have to create an integrated market. Remember those arguments?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, this shows how superficial the leadership has consistently been in the last 50 years. Japan market is not very big, it's 100 million people. US is 300 million people. Switzerland is only 5 million people those days. But there were at least 10 global companies from Switzerland.
Right.
So I think you're right. We have to think of the world a bit differently, and unfortunately, the momentum of the past continues.
Thanks, Partho. Thanks,
Thank you.
Paul.
Thank
We'll
you.
go for the second round. And I was thinking of going, in fact, 3 rounds, but looks like I will have to finish with the second round itself. And the second round, just please ask only one question. Peter, I come back to you. So the most important question which you have, please go ahead, unmute yourself.
Okay, so my third and last question to Partha is around the question of agency. So agency of the leader. And in particular, I'm going to refer to the role of systems in an organization. And I would characterize this question as with the phrase, computer says maybe. Or possibly, I'm sorry, Partha, I can't do that, to refer back to 2001. So I'm sorry, Partha, I can't do that. So back in the 20th century, we had a whole system where we could get compliance. We could kind of get what we wanted to happen through people and procedures. Then we migrated to sort of rigid computer systems, which were where we embedded in the computer systems the kind of rules and procedures that we previously had done manually. As we have moved into the 21st century, so in those two previous world systems, to use the language of systems dynamics, the human was in the loop and was on the loop in both cases. The leader was in both cases. As we moved in the last years, let's take the last 5 or 10 years, we now understand that there are areas where you gain competitive advantage, whether that be competition in the markets, in the commercial marketplace, or in the military environment, that you gain advantage in certain circumstances with systems where the human is not involved. In which case, the human is out of the loop. So my question to Partha is, as a leader of an organization, there are increasingly zones, critical zones of activity within the organization where not only the leader, but other humans in the organization are out of the loop. And they have to be for you to gain competitive advantage. So the question is, how does somebody lead where increasingly critical parts of the organization are no longer under your control?
It's a very relevant question because we are talking about knowledge economy, we're talking about automation. So indeed, Peter, when I think about it, the most critical parts of an organization operations are today automated, managed by systems, and leaders do not have direct control over them. The role becomes obviously one of oversight, guidance, and adaptation. So obviously,
sorry, I'm breaking the rules, Partha. Can I just jump in? I'm thinking specifically of autonomous, of artificial intelligence here. So I'm thinking specifically of areas where not only do we hand over automation, but we don't know how the automation came to its solution. Sorry to break the rule.
No, that's good. And in fact, I was about to get to AI. You can read my mind. So I was about to complicate the question. Now, with the advent of AI, all the more organizations, large and small, are relying on what they cannot see, but a lot of very high-speed decisions gets made by systems and algorithms and where they do not have control. If this is the answer, this is the answer. You have to move forward with it. As you know, most of the time when we make phone calls with a complaint, the computer is answering the question without really fully appreciating the emotions behind. So I've got 2 points here. Often I sort of face this question from my students and sometimes from my clients, but more from the students interested enough, not clients, because they're very comfortable with the automation and AI. The one is, I think we have to have some kind of override buffer arrangement in the system. So when the system driven by AI is falling short of the nature of outcome we expect, there has to be some kind of buffering arrangement in the algorithm so that a great leader can intervene in the decision-making process of the AI-led systems. That's point number one. But what is more important, if we are getting more and more dependent on AI, which is basically what our left brain is to do, the bigger question is how, as a leader, I would be able to activate the right brain, which is the imaginative part of the brain, to think of new models, new ways of doing things. So that's a positive way of looking at it, that maybe the organization's brain power could be more on the basis of the right brain as opposed to the left brain. Left brain is driven by AI, but with some override mechanisms, whereas activate the right brain of individual, which goes back to what Ravi was talking about earlier, which we have to have a significant amount of trust in the imaginative capacity of individuals. So the organization can truly shift from being left brain oriented to become right brain oriented. And keep in mind, Peter, if you look at our education system that has evolved over the last 500 years, I would say, it has focused on the development of the left brain. Logic, how do you speak logically? How do you think sequentially? How do you math? How do you do algebra? It's all left brain, left brain, left brain. But the right brain is how do you imagine? How do you construct new kind of architecture? That's what we are talking about, new types of relationships. It is right brain. So I feel leaders have a dual challenge: manage the systems with buffers, manage the organization where the leader could unlock the right brain capacity of people in the organization so that organizations and the solutions that they offer to society become significantly more imaginative.
Thank you, Partho. Thank you, Peter. May I request now Mr. Vivekanji to go ahead with the second round and the last question.
Thank you. Well, I'll just take off from where Paul left. I mean, Paul, central theme, if I would allude to, is lack of trust. And everything is happening because of lack of trust. And today's time, in earlier times, as I mentioned earlier, that in hierarchical organization leading from the front, you could lead by what I call 3 Fs: fear, favoritism, and force. You could do that, but it was not long-lasting thing. And if you want to really have a more sustained organization, you need to think of something else. And in fact, with the fake news and all these is coming, artificial intelligence coming, I strongly feel that trust is going to be the most valuable commodity in the world, more than gold or anything else, because we don't know what to trust and what not to trust. And therefore, if we really want to lead, we must develop trust, we must create trust. And that cannot happen if we only look at our self-interest. If you look at our self-interest, it will never come. We need to think of others also. We need to think of a position of where is benefiting everybody else also. So it has to have a more holistic way of looking at it. Although Peter mentioned, we had mentioned in his earlier thing that from money, we are now going to all stakeholders. Yes, I think so. We'll have to go to all stakeholders. How can it be only that one part of the equation is getting fed, and so much inequality is being created? So we got to find some balance. And therefore, in my view, trust is the most critical part to do whatever we want to do, whether we want to make a happy world, happy organization, or happy anything else. So trust, in my view, is I would define as what you call sustained integrity. Sustained integrity. So if I'm able to show integrity, integrity means being honest, being equitable, being fair, by treating everybody in an equal manner. So I need to develop trust, and trust, I know, I've seen an experience. If you build trust, then you can achieve 4 times what you would normally achieve, because the teams become so powerful. Teams become so powerful. So in my view, what we need to do is to create trust within the countries, within the organizations, between the countries and between the organizations. And somebody has to take the lead, or at least some people have to take the lead in this. And if it was agreed, if Germany and India can take the lead in that, I think they can set the model for the world to look at it.
Yeah.
So what do you have to comment on this greater necessity to build trust in today's environment?
Absolutely. Ravi, thank you for the question. Trust, I think, is, if you have to use one password of leadership, it is trust. Now, the question, I'll go a bit deeper, I mean, to offer the, how do we get out of this? Why are we not being able to build trust and rely on egos, rely on hierarchy, while trust has been a subject which has been discussed for a long time, but yet we fail to connect. And I think I would try to find a reason why we have failed to celebrate the term trust as it should be, as you want to see, Ravi. I think, if you look at the last 300 years of human development, there are 2 fundamental, I would say, equations which have driven the thinking of societies, particularly of the Western world, which has influenced the whole world. One is Adam Smith. Adam Smith's basic thinking was power of self-interest. If everyone can serve his own self-interest, society would develop. And indeed, we saw that in the rise of England, Europe, that how the power of self-interest worked. And the other equation was Charles Darwin's survival of the fittest. But if I now connect the two, the self-interest, survival of the fittest, it has become very powerful force, which is self, is all about self and no one else. Because I have to survive, and my real power is to survive my interest. So unfortunately, this has embedded the DNAs of many organizations, both government as well as corporates. And that is there. So we talk about trust, we talk about, hundreds of books have been written, many articles, maybe 1,000 articles in Harvard Business Review have been talking about people are our best resource, we should trust them. But whenever economic crisis is faced, the first thing that we do is to fire the people at the base of the pyramid who are not responsible for any decisions, but they are the most vulnerable people. So there goes your trust. So I feel, again, time has come. I'm so glad we are having this discussion. This fundamental force of Adam Smith and Charles Darwin, which perhaps was relevant, is still relevant, has to be put in a bigger context. As you rightly said, leadership is contextual. In the context, the world has changed, and there has to be a special effort made of how to earn trust. Now, what I found, again, in my recent visit to Japan, as you know, I used to live in Japan for 15 years, but this time I got a wake-up call. I saw how people trust each other. Even at 2 o'clock in the night, I could see young girls walking with full confidence, without any concern that someone could perhaps play on them. So that kind of establishing that kind of trust in the system, trust in the way we interact with each other, has to be established. And that is, again, by the way, is one of our goals at the Academy of Leadership, how to bring the trust into play. And as you know, trust can only happen when we are transparent, we are honest about our thoughts, and we can provide a vision where everyone could rally towards, which you did when you were running Tata Motors. I mean, to take the company from 3.5 to $35 billion in a period of 10 years, you must have done on the basis of trust. And to bring Jaguar, Land Rover, and the Korean relationship together with India was not easy. And I think I could almost, knowing you and having seen the success from outside, it was built on trust. But the other point I want to quickly touch on, you talked about the 3 Fs, force and favoritism. And that exactly goes back to what Paul Grumble was talking about. The way US government foreign policy has worked, through sanctions you create fear, you exert force by quickly activating your military machinery, and then you favor one over the other, as opposed to saying, let's solve the problem together. So I think, again, the point I think this discussion is underscoring, we need a fundamental change. And trust is the password, as I mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Partha. I didn't want to name any country or organization who profess those 3 Fs, but I think we all know that.
And there are too many of them. And unfortunately, there are too many of them. Yeah.
Thank you, Ravi. May I now turn towards Paul for your last question?
Yeah, thank you.
Then we'll open it to the normal public.
Okay, I will actually build on the question of Peter. Because before I came to you, I had an interesting meeting with the CEO of Airbus. And the question of Airbus was how to integrate artificial intelligence into the leadership of Airbus to beat Boeing. And actually, I think it's important for a leader to understand you have 2 different artificial intelligence sections. The one is what we called analytical artificial intelligence. So where you have self-driving cars, self-flying airplanes, things like this. So where you have, the automation of the process as the thing, but still the human judgment has to be programmed into it, which is a tricky thing, by the way. Therefore, I think the self-driving car is still not there, even if Google made a lot of progress. But this new wave of artificial intelligence is the generative artificial intelligence like ChatGPT. And this is a different animal, a completely different animal, because I told him it is not actually in the responsibility of the chief information officer. The chief information officer is responsible for the analytical artificial intelligence, doing data analytics, models, things like this. Very expensive projects, like every CIO likes to do it. Now, actually, he decided today that the responsible person is his chief HR officer. The human resources become the responsible thing for integrating the generative AI, because the creativity and your right brain thing is the key in this. And actually, he also get rid of jobs, of hierarchical jobs. He said, we have to have now the skill-based organization. If we have a problem, we have to understand which skills we need, to completely independent of jobs, of degrees, of PhDs and things like this. And the generative AI can even make an electrical installation people who did low value work, making to an electrical engineer. And also he said, now my people have the same information at the same time on the front than I have. So I have no longer actually, I think as a leader, the advantage being better informed. So this means a lot of decision-making is going to the front. And he said, this is an agile organization. And I think if we can outsmart and outskill Boeing, Airbus will be actually the dominant company for creating airplanes. So I think, what do you think about the separation of analytical artificial intelligence and generative intelligence to solve the question of Peter?
I would agree. And as I mentioned earlier, I fully agree with you. When I was talking about Peter's question about how AI will, I said there are two parts. One is the systems part, what AI will manage. Only thing I would say, let AI do much of the left brain work, but with ability to intervene. There has to be some override mechanisms which we have to design so that when the system, for some reason, is not working the right way, we could intervene. But much of the work is how to activate the right brain, which is clearly the AI HR role. And mind you, our right brain has been not trained as much as our left brain has been trained. All from the first day when you go to kindergarten, except Montessori. But Montessori focuses on the brain, by the way. But few of us have gone to Montessori. But from the
Bill Gates and Steve Jobs went to Montessori. This is one of the reasons.
Went to Montessori, and guess what?
Yeah.
Jeff Bezos also went to Montessori.
Yeah. Right.
No wonder that two Montessori kids have created great companies. So I think we have to bring Montessori type of education in our education system, and that's where HR has a very important role. They have to look at all the training systems that they have, which used to be left brain oriented, to switch to right brain orientation. And I fully agree with you. I think they have to look at the Gen I power with a different way. And that's why I have a different term for AI. I do not call it artificial anymore. I call it awakened intelligence.
Great.
We are awakening the intelligence of humanity using the power of AI by activating the right brain of NI, which is natural intelligence, to create a better society.
Thank you, Partho. Thank you, Paul. I've got too many questions, let me tell you. So I'm just picking up one question from one of the thought leaders located at Bombay, Prabhat Mitra. He wants to ask you, how can these wars which are going on between Ukraine, Russia, and Hamas, Iran and Israel, they are causing casualties in thousands and thousands. How can these be stopped amicably?
Well, that's a very deep question. Sorry, someone is.
I have
you
one
want to add something to that?
It was a very stimulating discussion. Am I on? Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And what Ravikant said, trust, and Partho said all these things. I want to say one thing. Whenever a great revolution takes place in the history of mankind, it has been an idea. Whether it was Voltaire, whether it was Gandhi, whether it was Martin Luther King or Abraham Lincoln. I mean, those were the ideas which created a very harmonious and loving world. We are in the midst of such a crisis. There is a crisis of conscience. Leaders have no conscience. There is not one uniform action. There is not something which is called humanity. Vivekananda said, you must obey if you deserve to command. But here, everybody, people in power, our countries, they want to ask people to obey to them, command them to obey, but they don't obey themselves. So my thinking is about AI, what Partho said, that our technology and our AI and all these things should be used, not just knowing what your sales are, what your profits are, but it should be used to create leaders. There should be programs using the power of AI to bring out to the world the Vedic Indian heritage, or Germany, are all good countries. People are good. Nobody is bad. But it is that leadership element which is missing, and we should use AI AI exclusively also in some cases to create an atmosphere of leadership which is based on love, compassion, and people think about other countries as they are themselves. Do to others, Christ said, what you want people to do to you, but no country listens to us. No country. Every country is just having its own axe to grind. And this is my regret. And there is no time. I would speak more and more, but I don't want to take more of your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Puran sir. You have been compared with J. Krishnamurti by some of our listeners here, sir. They say your voice is like J. Krishnamurti. And your comments are really very, very appreciated. Sir, can you reply to Partho Prabhat Mitra's question, sir?
Yes, please. Thank you. Sure. Mr. Mehta, thank you very much for the question. I think it goes back to what Purandang just had to say, that we need leaders who listens, who can listen proactively and then create enlightened solutions. Now, when you talk about Hamas, ISIS, or many other, the world is full of such unfortunate events, from Korea all the way to what's happening in the United States, what happened in January 6th, for example. Why? I think my answer to you would be, we have to go to the fundamentals. We have to understand, because everyone is good, but they become bad because of certain situations. So until and unless we go to the situations which has created this and come up with approaches to solve them, mechanisms to solve them, we would continuously have these artificial solutions. We'll create calm for a while, and then again something would pop up. So currently what is going on in Middle East, I think is obviously would not solve the problem. It's in fact expanding the problem, if you will. It's deepening the problem. So I feel time has come where leaders have to learn how to go to the fundamentals, what has created these problems, and try to go to the root cause and come up with root solutions. We are coming up with superficial solutions, never going to the root cause, and in the process, crises are occurring. Now, if you ask me, how do I deal with ISIS and Al-Qaeda or such forces today? Obviously, I would not take a militaristic approach, because how many people would you want to kill? And if when you kill one person, 10 new people would be born, and they would obviously try to take revenge maybe after 100 years. So that doesn't solve the problem. The problem has to be more philosophical in nature, more dialogues. They use the word diplomacy, but I feel the world has also forgotten what diplomacy means. Diplomacy really requires a tremendous capacity to understand the other side, as opposed to selling your side. We spend a lot of time selling what we believe in, what some people call one-upmanship, but as opposed to being humble and listening, and in the process create an integrated view. So that would be the nature of leadership we need. Unfortunately, I don't see such a leader, and that's why we are having a discussion like this. Prabhat, you could be that leader. We should not undermine any person, because I think one thing Vivekananda is to say very, very powerfully during his life, that I'm nothing special. Each one of us could be what we want to be. Only thing, we have to take ownership of that problem, ownership, and fully stay with the problem. So unfortunately, we have not yet seen such leaders emerge. It is our hope, through the Academy of Leadership, we will be able to give birth to such leaders who can take on such crises that we are seeing in Middle East, and we are seeing all over the world. Look at Rohingya crisis next to your neighboring state. Look at what's happening in Korea. Look at what's happening in different parts of Africa. A lot of genocides are taking place in Africa. We do not talk about it. As soon as the US would get involved, it will become a news. But there are a lot of places where US is not involved, as a result is not in the news. So that's another funny thing. We have to learn how to manage the media so they can bring the problems of the world to the world global leaders, and in the process, not have them engage with them with superficial mindset, but help them to engage with understanding of the root causes. And I think that's where we have serious problems. We do not engage with the root causes.
Thanks, Partha.
I want to add that, Jetli, Partha, is that, say, it is so serious a problem that with climate change and these wars, maybe in 10 years we will not be there. You and I will not be around.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's why we have this academy.
Yeah.
There's a purpose. When the academy was set up 5 years ago, I will send you the vision paper. The whole purpose was to take on some of the fundamental problems of our society, which is not being addressed adequately. And we need leaders for that. Yeah.
So the message which, let's say, is coming from our Academy of Leadership is that all those who are spreading hatred in this humanity, they should restrain themselves and stop spreading the hatred. They should spread the message of love and harmony and embrace everybody. That is what is required. Am I right, Parthoda?
Absolutely. Brilliantly said.
So with that, I think you should conclude because we are running with our time. So no more questions. So your last words, please.
I think I will just quickly summarize, Commander, what we have discussed, because I feel this is the kind of discussion which should happen in the United Nations, in the main hall in Manhattan, but we had it from all over the world, so that is fantastic. I think the key messages that I take, and I hope all of you would agree with me, the first, that we are living through a crisis and it has to be taken very seriously. Seriously in a sense that we have to remain committed to get to the root causes. That was the fundamental point which came up, of why, in spite of hundreds of books on leadership, hundreds of books on philosophy, hundreds of great articles that get published in the name of peace and prosperity, yet our behaviors, our leadership etiquettes, leadership thoughts remain highly, I would say, adversarial to situations that we want to deal with. That is the first thing that we have to address, why that is happening, go to the root cause. And it is my hope the Academy of Leadership would take on such a challenge to create a better world. The second message that came through, all the way through from Ravi to Peter to Paul, to the questions that were raised by Larry and the points that were made by Puran Dang, is that we have an opportunity. So I would not be too pessimistic to create the new future using the power of AI on one side in a positive way, where we could activate the right brain, which is imaginative part of our system, which if we could use more proactively with a vision of a better world, we could create the more enlightened civilization. But it will not be easy. We have to recognize it has to be a new S-curve. So it is not just minor tweaking. It has to be a fundamental shift from one S-curve to another S-curve. Now, third is switching S-curves is not easy because it needs a fundamental refresh of the mind. And particularly when we're talking about leadership, and Ravi touched on it, we're talking about egos. We're talking about believing that I have the answer. I think we have to switch out of a world of egos to a world of zero egos or world of humility. And that is possible. We have seen some societies like Japan, which has been able to cultivate that. The third point would be how to cultivate humility. That's the third point which came through. The fourth point which came through, which Paul, you touched on, the need for a new world order. And I cannot agree more with you. That's exactly what I spoke about 20 months ago in the same forum here when I talked about the deficit of leadership exposed. That was the title. And I was basically talking about the last 200 years, how from one war to another war to another war to the Ukraine-Russia war, we have moved on. Yet At the end of each war, we created institutions like the League of Nations, United Nations, to quote unquote, to avoid conflicts. But there was a fundamental problem there. We assumed there will be conflict, as opposed to saying, how will we could create situation not to avoid conflicts, but to not to create conflicts, which is a very different way of looking at the world, which is there would never be conflicts between nations, and that is how to create enlightened synergies. That's where I feel we have to resurrect some of the teachings of Vedic philosophy or the old Western philosophies, which people like Max Muller, Kant, John Locke in Scotland talked about, integrate them, Confucius, Taoism, and create a philosophical mindset for the world. We talk about it, it stays in the churches, in the temples, we recite them, but we do not practice them. I think we have to work on that. That's the fourth point. And the fifth message, which is a very powerful message, is the point Ravi talked about, trust. Trust is a very simple word. We have created this trust in financial terms, foundations, trusts. But what does it really mean? It is basically means, which I feel we are mismanaging, is trusting yourself. It seems that the world has lost trust in itself. If each individual trusts himself or herself, naturally the trust towards others, towards environment, towards society, towards nations would increase. So I feel the one other role of the academy would be to increase the ability to connect with the inner conscience. If we connect with the inner conscience, if we honor our inner conscience, our ability to honor the outer world would significantly increase. So these are the 5 messages which came through from the great points Peter, Paul, Ravi, Commander, you, and all the other individuals have raised. We can have another session on this because I know there are a lot of questions. Even in my emails, I'm receiving questions. But maybe we should have a repeat session and try to reach the root cause. But thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, Commander. And I hope the Academy of Leadership would be able to take this movement forward, as I keep repeatedly underscoring. This is a very important movement which Major General continuously talks about, and we have to take it with that level of seriousness. And IIT Kharagpur deserves to take it forward with respect of the people that lost their lives in the jail of Hijli. With that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Parth. So nice of you. Now may I request the chairman of the academy, Professor Vashne, to give formal vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Partha sir. Thank you, Dr. Peter, Dr. Gambal, and Ravikant sir for this exciting session that today we had, and covering various question answers, trust, and lot of, I think, learning for me as well. And as you rightly pointed out, definitely the academic leadership is going to take forward several actions and do well into the next few coming years. And definitely we are going to see a change. A change is important, change in mindset. That's the most important part. And once there is a change in mindset happens, automatic trust and everything will come automatically, and see the forward progress around the globe as well as in the country. So, and thank you all, audience. I will say all the distinguished guests who have joined across the globe. And thank you, Commander Jetli ji, for conducting this session very nicely. And have a great day ahead, and have a good night to all of you. Thank you, sir. And we can have one group photograph. You can just switch on the camera.
Yes.
Please.
Please switch on your videos. Unmute your videos kindly for a group photograph. Deepak Phatak ji, I can see you. My pranam to you, sir. There are so many great personalities here. I find difficult to name so many of them. Amar Desai ji, Madhusudan Chakravarti ji, Makhija Sahab, Arjesh Budhi Raja, Jairam ji, Jaho, right? Great, sir.
Mr.
And there are
Sen.
some on the other screen also who are not switching on. Anshul Avasthi is great. Thank you. Anderson Swami, please switch on your videos.
Yes.
Yeah, some more, so that the screen should be full. Screen should be full. There are still one or two more. Please unmute your videos and give a smile. Smile. Paul Grumble's smile is the best smile, I tell you, in this. Yes. Really salute you, sir. Great.
Thank you.
Pranav, photo
Very
taken?
interesting.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Peter, thank you. Ravi, thank you.
Thank you.
As you, yeah,
you,
Paul,
thank
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Madhu, thank you.
Thank you, Subrata Chattopadhyay ji.
Chat with you.
Hi.
Ah.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Partha.
Now, can you stop recording?
Wow. I think we had a record attendance today. And it was on the YouTube also, by the way. So many people were seeing it on the YouTube also.